Thank you, Ryan, for putting the seminar series together for us. It's really great to be able to speak to everybody kind of about these different topics. So, a little bit about me. I'm Ryan Eckhardt. I started my career, I guess, in accounting at UW-Whitewater. From there, I did my one-year public accounting work at RSM McGladrey, did audit and tax, and realized that's not for me. So from there, I jumped to a big organization called Cummins, located in the Stoughton location. Started there in cost accounting. We had, I think, 11 different plants, 8 or 9 of them in Wisconsin, 1 in Ohio, 1 in Waynesboro, Georgia. That was a lot of fun. That's kind of where I started getting into the world of financial analysis. So before that, it's just traditional accounting, right? Kind of the boring stuff is the way I look at it. But there I got into just analyzing business and understanding how data and information helps you make better decisions in that organization. After my 3 years there, I realized, this big company thing's not for me. I learned a ton, but I want to get to an area where I can learn more and give more to the organization and wear more hats, if you will. So in 2006, I joined an organization called Thermostor. We were a $36 million business at that point in time. Started in cost accounting, financial analysis, did many different hats there. So I was the director of finance and tech service and quality and IT. Eventually we were bought by private equity, and there were multiple businesses in that group where I was in charge of all the IT groups in that business as well. So let's start talking a little bit about data challenges. So there's kind of these 4 things that I see when you talk to different organizations about data. And they say, look, my systems are too old. Our data is not all in one system. We've got bad data. We don't have any APIs, or we don't have any way to automate that data. So what do those things really mean, though? Like, those are just things that people say, right? So the first one, my systems are too old. To me, that means I don't have any processes, or I don't have enough processes, or they're not defined very well, right? You've got to implement some of these processes that don't exist within your ERP system into different SaaS solutions that exist out there in the world. Take those things outside of that ERP. You can't just make a new one today or switch it to a brand new NetSuite. You've got to be able to adapt to that. Our data is not all in one system. So now this is where you flip the conversation. Maybe you've got too many of these outside processes. There's a sweet spot in between, right? Your ERP maybe can't do everything. You got to supplement, but you can't put every process that you have that doesn't exist into its own individual bucket. It's going to be too confusing, too much going on. We've got bad data. A lot of times this means people don't understand the data, what's going on. So here's an example. How many of you get reports every day? Maybe your sales information, something in the organization, right? You get this daily PDF file, Excel file, maybe something like that. That's giving you great information. You might also have someone that's extracting data from your system and summarizing sales information, and they say, the sales information, I summed all this up, it doesn't tie to my report that I get daily. It's all bad data. I don't get it, right? So that's typically what happens when you see this. We've got bad data reason. And then the last one is we don't have APIs. I don't have a way to automatically grab this data. And what does that really mean? There's just no automation that exists, right? So what do these 4 things have in common? Well, I call them excuses, right? These are just things that people say because they don't know how to do that next step. They don't know how to figure it out, okay? So let's talk then a little bit, well, how do you get some data? And there's multiple ways. So first one, let's talk about the automation method. There's APIs. So what does API mean? Application Programming Interface, big boring words, right? What does it really do? What is an API? If you think about it, you've got maybe your ERP, your main system of data, and you want to get that out into something that's usable. So an API will basically program all these different tables and fields and data and say, take it from this system and these fields and put it here in this middle spot, and then we're going to program it to put it into a usable area into the same format, right? That's what an API does. You see it a lot in the SaaS world, the software as a solution, cloud-based solutions, because you don't have access to their back-end system, so you have to use an API. Another version of an API, it'll be a half step, where it's already programmed to grab from your data. You just need to tell it where to go with it next, okay? That's APIs. ETLs. So it stands for extract, transform, and load. Again, more technical words. All it means, though, is you're going to extract from your system, take it out. You're going to maybe transform that data. You're going to manipulate it in some way. Sometimes you don't. And you're going to load it into another tool. There's 2 main ones I use today. One's called Fivetran and one's called Matillion. They're both used for different reasons. Fivetran I use a lot when there's automated connections, things like QuickBooks, simple solutions, and they charge based on the transactions that you run through the system. So if you don't have many transactions, it's a very effective and efficient way to manage that. Matillion does it based on time, right? So I have a client that I'm linking everything up to their Salesforce environment, and there's millions of rows. It can get very expensive using Fivetran, but it takes 5 minutes to upload it. There's not a ton of data in it, so I'll switch to that one. SQL. So many ERPs today, SAP, JD Edwards, NetSuite, they're all using kind of a SQL backend. These are great solutions to be able to grab data out of, really easy. They're already structured data. Makes it very simple for us to grab data out of it. Okay, the next one, Power Automate. This one I think is where it gets a lot of fun, because for smaller businesses that don't have all the things we just talked about, they're like, how do I get data? How do I get it usable? How do I automate this? I don't have the people to do all of this manually. And Power Automate is a tool within the Microsoft stack. So if you're already a Microsoft subscriber, it's free. It's just part of it. And this tool, as long as your system, you can extract a data like a download an Excel file and put it into a folder, or maybe you can have that system email a file somewhere. You can use a tool like Power Automate to monitor those locations and grab those files and put them into a usable location. So it's like an automation. It's not API, it's not direct, but it gets that job done, and for a system where maybe you don't normally think you can get that data out of it. Okay, OCR. This has really gotten to a crazy point. So I remember early in my career, OCR was kind of coming on the scene, and it was not so great. But there's some really cool things, even within Adobe today, if you buy their package for OCR, where you can scan documents and it grabs that data out and puts it into an Excel file or a text file for you. So if you think about this, if there's two ways to kind of handle this. If you want to take a bunch of old data that you have, so maybe your new system, you've got access to it, but you want to get that historical data in your system, you can set up a scanning process, look for similar headers, grab columns, put it into an Excel file. Super helpful. If you have to use it because your system is just not capable of extracting data, it's another way to kind of automate that system and process for you. Okay. All right. I listed Power Automate twice because there's another version or a way to use Power Automate. So the prior one we talked about is getting data out and using it. There's another way to push data into your system. So if you've got a system that doesn't allow you to import data, it's really hard to get in there without just manually typing it. You can use Power Automate Desktop. And it basically, has anybody used the record macro in Excel before? Anybody? Yeah, a few of you. So it works very similar, where you have your ERP system open on the screen, and you click on a cell, and you say, this cell or this box in my ERP is going to get this column from Excel. And this box over here is going to get this column in Excel. And you go through that whole recording process, and when you're done, you hit play, and it inserts all of those Excel rows right into your ERP for you. So you don't have to pay for somebody to do data importing. You don't have to do it yourself and waste the hours to put that data in. So there's really cool tools out there, especially if you're using that Microsoft stack of solutions. Okay, bad data. There's 4 types of bad data from my perspective. First one is not complete. So a good example of this is CRM solutions. Salespeople, they do a ton of work in the field. They're grabbing data, but maybe they don't grab somebody's cell phone number or their address or their zip code of the company location. So it doesn't get filled in, right? They're grabbing the information they can or the information that's valuable to them, but they don't completely fill the information out. So not complete, missing address, titles, all that kind of stuff. Data just gets entered wrong, right? Somebody transposes numbers, they skip a record, right? Very common for that just being your bad data problem. The data doesn't exist, right? You don't have a process for collecting that data, right? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, about some examples. The data isn't tied to other reports. Like we mentioned before, you get that daily report coming from your system, you extract data, it doesn't tie out, you don't know why, you just say it's bad. So let's talk about how you address some of these things and what some of them are. So the obvious one, you're missing data, what do you got to do? You got to complete it. It's just that simple. You've got to get your salespeople to collect that information, fix the process, And usually you need to work with them and help them understand that you're using this information in a certain way. Show them the reports that you're pulling together and say, this is why I need the information. If they don't think you're using it, they're not going to waste their time putting it in. Just a waste of time for them. So let's talk about, I got a couple different examples of bad data and how we addressed those in the past. So I was working for an organization that we sold things in kits. So we sold a bunch of individual SKUs. We were a restoration manufacturing company. We made dehumidifiers, fans, air scrubbers, a bunch of other items. Sometimes we would sell those as a kit, like a promotion, maybe a dehumidifier, 4 fans, 2 air scrubbers and such. The way our system functioned though is the sales value was attached to the kit line at the top. And we had all these SKUs underneath that were sold. So whenever we looked and analyzed our information, our sales information, it would show 100% gross margin on our kit item and 100% cost on all of our SKUs. So now when we looked at how much are we making on just dehumidifiers, we'd have this huge outlier that would impact our overall gross margin and pull it down. So what do we have to do? We had to fix that data. So we generated a report that took that kit sales value and spread it across all those components. We just took it as a percentage cost of the total cost of that kit. So every item now had the same gross margin percentage, but that was fine because we needed to understand that when we sold this whole thing as a kit, what the value was. But now we had this huge benefit because now we can look at just dehumidifier sales and say how much gross margin did we have when sold as a kit, when sold outside of a kit. We didn't have this weird 100% gross margin just throwing our data off and getting us all confused with what was happening. And we just had this additional availability to see how much margin we had across the board. One other example of pulling data together. So this is one where we didn't have the data to start with. So we're going to pull some more operations stuff in that maybe Stephen will understand. We had this thing called non-conformances. So when products came in the door, components, raw materials came in the door, they'd either get inspected or go straight to the production line. And sometimes they'd fail inspection, sometimes they'd fail on the production line. And we had this process where we had an Excel spreadsheet that we had all these fields we had to fill out. And that was great, we had the data, but what would happen is that Excel spreadsheet would be filled out, we'd send it to purchasing, purchasing sends it to the vendor, trying to get credit, trying to get replacement parts, and then it would just kind of die. Like you didn't know how many were out there, you didn't know when they got returned, right? You didn't know any of this information, they just kind of happened. So we decided to put this into a process. So instead of having just an Excel file, we now had a record system. And we knew how many were completed. We knew what status all of them were in. How many of them are we waiting for a vendor reply? How many of them are waiting for an 8D, which is a quality document that says the vendor's not going to make this mistake anymore, and here's why. We knew how many were waiting to get money back from. And now we could start using that data not only to improve our internal processes to know where everything's at, but now we knew each vendor, how many non-conformances they had. We know the value, the quantity of SKUs, how quickly they responded. Did they reduce the number of non-conformances? So now our purchasing group had all this data to go back to our vendors and say, hey, vendor A, you're not doing so well in these areas. We need you to make some improvement or we got to find somebody else. So not only are we collecting this data, we're measuring our vendors, we're communicating with our vendors, but now we're making improvements for operations at the same time. Right? If our vendors know they're having these problems, they're going to make those corrections, and then our operations team is not going to see shutdowns as much as they would see in the past. Do I need one data system? Right? This is a common thing too. This is people, they say, it's not, this process doesn't exist in my system. We need to get all of these 5 systems into one. And my answer to that is no, you don't need it all in one system, and I'd argue you don't want it all in one system. This is what data warehouses are for, and we're going to talk about data warehouses in a minute. But I think there's a real problem with putting all of your data in one system. One is you have a situation where you're duplicating that information, and that data can get out of line at sometimes. Maybe it's missing, maybe it misses a day where it comes in. And you're also then jamming that into another solution that might not have a very good visualization tool to it. You know, your ERP is not really designed to be a BI tool. It's meant to kind of help your operations side. Okay, when does it? When does it make sense to have all that data in one system? Sometimes from a process standpoint, it does make sense to get some of that data joined together. So here's an example. Another operations side. You've got a production line, you're making 500 units today, and you have components that are a one-to-one match. You only have 400 of those components. So at some point, you're going to shut that line down because you can't make all 500. So what we did is we created a shortage app on our phone for our line supervisors. So when they saw that something was going to be short, they could go on their phone and they could identify this part number, this PO number, this vendor. We're going to be short by this time. That can now get sent to the purchasing group automatically, and they're identifying, hey, I got to get this. Line's going to be shut down in 2 hours. They start communication back with the vendor, get parts here in time. This data then, if it was marked as such that I was going to shut the line down soon, would go to a production board, which is a TV screen, in the shipping or in the receiving department, so that they knew when that purchase order came in the door, they needed to get it to the line right away. Okay. Now, in that whole example, we needed information like part numbers, right? Vendor numbers. And we didn't have that in the app. That existed in our ERP system. So in that situation, we did have to create a hook and pull some data out of our ERP, but we did it in a way that was only a one-way relationship. We didn't want to push data back in. We only use it as reference information. So those are the examples I would use when you say, well, do you want to put it all in one system or not? Okay, other systems that have data in today. So we talked ERP, MRPs, there's QuickBooks Online, there's CRM solution, there's spreadsheets have data in them, right? There's pieces of paper that have data on them, right? So many times we kind of ignore those data logs, and we could turn that into something that becomes useful from that point. What other systems do you guys see out there that have data in it that maybe I'm missing here?
Quality system.
There we go. That's a good one. Not just financial information, right?
Just someone's brain.
Yeah, that's a system for sure. Yeah. Awesome. So there's a few other ones to talk about. SharePoint files, SharePoint lists. Those are ways to kind of collect information. There's this really cool solution out there I've seen people use called Monday.com. Has anybody seen that one? Does that sound familiar? Oh, quite a few. I think it's a great tool to kind of create a process and automation around it. So some of those examples, like my non-conformance example and this other one, I think would be a great kind of solution for that. Data lakes. Nobody knows what data lakes are. Great. So we're going to talk about data lakes in a second, but it's a great spot where data can exist that you can grab to do or pull information from. Production equipment logs. So this is one that I'm really seeing come on the scene that I think people are kind of ignoring. You can have production equipment, let's say it's some kind of stamping machine or a cutting machine, and they're starting to collect their own data now, like how many stamps this machine is doing per day, per cycle, whatever it might be. And you can collect that information, and let's say once that stamping machine gets to 10,000 stamps, we know it fails. Well, we could set up an alert on that. It says, hey, 9,500 stamps, let's send a PM, a preventive maintenance request, to our maintenance department to say, hey, this thing is going to need maintenance in the next 500 stamps. And now you can take that record and track how quickly do you get that PM resolved. Now you can manage your maintenance department and understand how many of these maintenance requests do they have. Are they staffed properly? Right? All this data now can turn into something that becomes very useful in your organization to monitor, manage, and such. Okay. So now we've got all this data, right? We just talked about all different ways to get it, all the problems, how to solve it. Now what happens? So now somebody sits in the office and they extract it. They add calculations to it. They summarize it. They create PDFs or they create power pivot tables off of it. Then they make graphs out of it. And they do all this work every time they extract it. Every day, every week, every month, they're doing the same thing. And if they go on vacation, you don't get it. Right? Because they're not there to do that work, right? All this just gets repeated over and over time. So this is where BI can really eliminate that mundane work for you. And it gives that person now the option to do more value-added work, maybe to analyze that information for you and give you that better insight instead of spending all their time just extracting and modifying data. Okay, how do we use BI to save money? So let me give you a few examples of what I've seen in the past. In manufacturing, we've got this metric called PPV, purchase price variance. Anybody heard of PPV before? Yeah, quite a few. So for those who haven't, it's basically you take the quantity of parts that you receive, you know your standard cost in the system, you know your PO value that you're getting charged by your vendor, and you take that difference times the quantity, that's your purchase price variance. This is an indicator of costs going up or down over time, usually within a 1-year time period. So we had this issue, especially during the 2020 COVID times, when price increases were just going crazy, right? We couldn't get parts in the door. We had all these challenges. And we said, well, 9 months from now, our costs are going to be totally different. But 9 months from now, we can't do a price increase then, right? We're going to be eating all this cost up to this point. So what we did is we put in a PPV early warning system. We knew our purchase orders. We knew when they were supposed to be received, right? We knew what our PO price was, and we knew what our standard cost was. So we just identified a report by SKU that showed us what those different PPV marks were going to be out in the future. And then we rolled that back into all of our finished goods as well, so that we could kind of calculate what our future gross margin was going to be with those new costs. And we could see how much are we going to start losing in 9 months from now. That gave us the opportunity to act now versus acting 9 months from now. Price increases, they can take 6 months, 9 months, 12 months to implement. You might have contractual obligations with your customers that you can't change prices for 12 months. So the sooner you've got information in your business to make a decision, the sooner you can save that money. Tracking failures. So we use our CRM solution to do case management so we can understand failures from our customer side. That gave us the opportunity to understand what SKUs are failing, what are the error codes, right? What's causing the problem? In some cases, was it vendor A or vendor B of that component that caused the problem? Was it something internally? Was it something that happened in the manufacturing process? Can we go back to our standard work during the time when that was manufactured and see what was our standard work at that time and what's changed? Or do we need to change that standard work? So all of that data helped us make better business decisions and therefore saved us money. Just other general things you can do, analyze your what ifs. As soon as you get data into a system, now you can do what if analysis. You can do a lot better ROI analysis when that data exists. We talked a little bit about monitoring equipment in your production area. That's a great way to save money from my perspective. And then the old accountant general, just cost management, right? You've got your SG&A and it's the last week of the month and you've already spent 90% of your budget. Hey, be careful. Or hey, you're well under, you should spend more money. No? Nobody does that? Okay. I figured as much. Okay, data warehousing. So I'll put you guys to sleep for a few minutes. We'll talk about some data warehousing. So what is data warehousing? Do I need one? And why do I want one? Data warehouse, large store of data accumulated from a wide range of sources within a company and used to guide management decisions. What does that mean? What that means is that I've got this whole data cube, if you will, this whole data system, and I'm going to put my relational data in this spot. So what's relational data? Picture you've got an invoice. And at the invoice, the top of it, you've got an invoice number, you've got a date, you've got your vendor name, address. That's table 1. Underneath that, you got all of your line items that you're selling to that customer, right? That's table 2. They're related, a one-to-many relationship. So data warehouses accept this kind of data into it. This is called structured data. Structured just means it's relational, okay? The other thing you can use is a data lake. So I just talked about data lake a little while ago. This is how I describe a data lake. Assume there's a bucket here in the front of the room, and I take all of my paper copy reports that I have on my desk, just everything and anything that exists in the company, and I just shove it in that bucket. That's a data lake. So I need to get it digitized. I can't have it in my paper copy anymore. It's got to exist somewhere. So I'll put it there. I don't know if I'm going to use it today. I might use it 2 months from now. I might not ever use it. But it's there and it's available. So then how do they work together? Well, maybe eventually I find out, well, I've got all this data from all my key punches, from people punching in and out of the door every day. And maybe I need to use that to identify start times or something. Now I can grab that data from the data lake, and I can keep all that data flowing in there, but I can grab that data out and then put it into my data warehouse in a relational way and make it usable. Those are the difference, structured data versus unstructured data. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this overall process. So today we've got these systems, QuickBooks, Salesforce, NetSuite, ADP. There's tons of different solutions out there today. We take that data, we put it into a data warehouse, right? Make it easy to see all of that, right? You're taking all these different systems that exist and we're getting it all kind of into that one spot. This is why you don't need to have all your data in your one ERP. You put it in a data warehouse, okay? And then we take tools like Power BI and Tableau and mount that on top of that data warehouse to do all of your fancy graphs and such, okay? So why don't we just take data straight from those systems and put it into Power BI? So here's an example that's painful for me to admit, but I made this mistake many years ago. We implemented a CRM solution, and it was an on-premise solution. So what does that mean? I had a SQL environment on a piece of hardware in my building, and I had a front-end server. That's the piece that everybody sees, right? And we mounted all of our Power BI reporting directly to that SQL environment, and everybody loved it. We got so much great information out of it, and it was so cheap to put together. It was amazing. And then 6 years later, Microsoft said, we're getting rid of on-premise CRM environments. You have to migrate to the cloud. And half of me said, great, because we need to upgrade our CRM solution, and the cloud solution is way better than what we have today. Problem is, we had all these hooks from Power BI right into our SQL environment. And now we had this huge upgrade problem. To just upgrade CRM probably would have been a $10,000 to $15,000 cost. Not a big deal for us. We would have found a way to find that money and make that happen. It was 5, 6x that when all this data was connected. Because you can't just reconnect this to another relational data set. If I would have moved everything from this solution, our CRM, right into a Snowflake data warehouse, I could have just said, pull my next data set in, and within my data warehouse, say merge all these fields together, and Power BI wouldn't have known any different. I wouldn't have lost all that time and effort of rebuilding everything in this environment. So really huge advantage of using a data warehouse in that perspective. What are some other ways? The first one I really like, non-system data. And what is non-system data? These are things like if you've got business units in your organization, but you don't name your business units with any kind of system, it's just a nomenclature that you use outside, that'd be some like non-business data. You've got to put it somewhere so that your reporting can use it, so you can filter on it and such, but you got to get it somewhere. So a data warehouse is a good spot for that. You might have some other data like part numbers and commodity classes, another purchasing terminology. Maybe you don't want to bring both data sets in, so you combine them together. Right? You say, take all these SKUs, finance-related commodity class, join them, and then throw it into the data warehouse. That's a transformation. Okay? And aggregation could be things like, if you go back to the invoice example, maybe you don't want all those individual SKUs in your data warehouse. So you just summarize them and get a total sales value, you aggregate it together, and then throw that data into a data warehouse. So there's many different reasons to use it, not just to grab data from all your systems and throw it in. You might do a bunch of these other value add pieces and have that exist here at this location. You couldn't do those things if you're linking directly in. Okay, let's talk a little bit about visualization tools. So I kind of coined this all-in-ones versus enterprise. So what are these all-in-ones? Domo, ClickView, Looker, ThoughtSpot, Grow. Anybody heard of any of these? Yep, a couple of you. So these are the all-in-ones. What does that mean? They're an ETL tool, they're a data warehouse, they're a visualization tool all in one. Kind of a one-stop shop from that perspective. Usually have some type of API built into them to connect into your system, so very simple to do those data connections. Enterprise, things like Power BI, Tableau. These are the more powerful tools. Sorry to use power in the Power BI view here. But these are the things that typically need a data warehouse connected to them. So let's talk about the pros and cons of each of these. So on the all-in-ones, these are really easy to build in. right? They've designed them for the person in your organization that doesn't have the technology background. Maybe they're a finance background. They understand how to manipulate the data, but you don't want to spend all that time learning something technical. It's usually what I would call like a box programming style, where there's a box on the screen and you put a graph in it. And there's a box over here and you put this graph in it. But it's very simple, very easy to use. Another pro, it's one price for everything, right? You're getting that ETL, that data warehouse, the visualization, all in one. The easy block style development. What's a con here is that you've got limited connections a lot of times. So if you're not using an ERP or a data system that there's already a direct API connection for, you might have a hard time getting that data in. And sometimes you pick these tools using the ERP that you have, and you're like, okay, great, there's a data connection here, so I'm going to use this, it's going to be great. And then you have another data system you want to bring in, and this tool doesn't support that one, and now you're stuck, right? You can only use it for that one solution that you had. Manual data can be a challenge, we talked about before, pulling that non-business data into your solution. And you're limited. Like, you can only use these block style tools that exist within that tool set. And they do that to make it easy, right? Because you can have somebody in your organization just do this and not be educated in the background of it. But you're limited as to the visualizations you can see. From my perspective, that can be a challenge, because as you're trying to get your organization to look at graphs on a screen versus that PDF that gets emailed to you every day, you need something that's visually pleasing. You need something that doesn't look the same with every graph, because not all of your data is the same data, right? So you want people to know, oh, this graph is my PPV report, and this graph is my sales report, because it looks a little bit different. It doesn't all look the same cookie cutter. The other challenge here is a lot of times you're going to end up paying extra. You don't know this up front, but you might need some tech support. So you're going to call a help desk, and they're not going to know anything about your business because they're just a standard help desk. And you got to explain what you're trying to do and what your data is, and that becomes frustrating, but it's additional cost. Some of them also have the ability to just pay monthly for a tech support person. That's your person that does understand your business, but you're paying for that whether you use it or not. Enterprise. Pros here is that we've got endless customization. You can do a lot of cool things in these kind of solutions. Changing colors on things. I know there's at least one person, maybe another person that doesn't like color in this room. But ignoring that, I worked in an organization that we had somebody like that too. So we really focused on not just color on graphs, but shapes, right? If you did line graphs, you're changing those points from circles to triangles to squares, because that you can see versus color. It's an important thing to do. Can't always do that in those all-in-one tool sets. Larger support network, there's Microsoft support all over the place for these kind of tool sets. It's easy to find people. You can embed this stuff in other Microsoft stuff. I'm going to talk about that specifically. Anybody here use Microsoft Teams? Yeah. So we did something that I thought, I still love talking about this today. We had 3 different business divisions, and each one was a different size revenue-wise. And we wanted to understand, once order intake hit certain levels in each of those businesses, we wanted to send a chat message to a group of people, right? Usually it's the president, the VP of sales, sales leader of that business unit, probably the CFO, because they always want to know what's going on with sales. And so you get this chat message that would come through on Teams and say, hey, you've hit 100,000 order intake today. And from there you can click on that, go straight to your Power BI review. It pre-filters it to today's order intake, and you can see who bought and what did they buy, and do all the fancy things you can look at in Power BI. So again, we've been talking this whole presentation about how do you get data faster, how do you make those business decisions. There's nothing better than just getting it as soon as it comes in the door. I think it's better looking than some of these other tools, just because you can do a lot of that customization work. And these systems handle upgrades better, right? If you take my example of switching a CRM solution, I've got my visualization built off of that one data connection that's coming in. I bring a new data connection in, I've got to rebuild all those graphs within that tool set. Again, I do that within a data warehouse, and I can just merge that data together, and the reporting knows no different. Some of the cons here, though, you have to have a technical knowledge, right? This is not Excel. You're learning a whole new language called DAX to do formulas. It can get complex, so it's a little bit more of an investment. And you should use a data warehouse when you're using this tool. You don't have to, but I'm going to say you should. All right, let's talk a little bit about AI. Everybody wants to get an AI, right? Everybody here is in AI today, right? No? You're not all? Okay. Let's talk about a few different types of AI. I am by no means an AI expert, but I dabble in it. Maybe I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so maybe I've got some experience there. So the three I'm going to talk about, let's start first with generative AI. These are the ones you guys know about, right? This is your ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity, Meta. What makes this generative? You can generate text, images, audio, video, and this is reactive AI through prompting. Okay, that's generative AI. Agentic AI is agents. So this is your chatbots on a website, right? They're collecting information from you. They're trying to answer those questions. They're replying. Sometimes they just collect a bunch of information and send you to somebody, right? But it's speeding up that process. I've got a colleague that runs a call center. And one of his major clients are vet clinics. And he put in his call center an AI call center feature. And it's really cool. It sounds just like a real person. Like you would think it would sound kind of robotic, but it doesn't. It's amazing. And you can program it, you can teach it, like how to understand your business. And he's able to take a ton of these phone calls, which are just people trying to schedule an appointment for their dog, right? And AI is just looking at a calendar, talking to this person and saying, looks like we've got these time frames available. Do you want one of those? Okay, sure. Or, hey, it looks like you're a new customer. Can I set you up? Right? And AI is taking care of all of that work for them. Right? So that's an example of agentic AI. Okay, the last one, this is not a proper terminology. This is something I just made up. But I'm calling it process and custom AI. So there's some people that I work with that understand this world. And what they're doing is they're taking some kind of AI process and bringing it inside your four walls, right? So one of the big risks in AI is that it exists out in the world and anybody can have anything. But they're bringing it inside and they're training that AI based on your business process, right? So if you think about all the processes that exist, order entry in your organization and shipping documents and all this kind of stuff, could you put an AI internally, program it within your organization, and have it speed up and automate some of these steps of your process? So that exists today. I don't know how to do it, but if you want to learn more about it, I can get you connected to the right person. Come see me after the seminar. Okay, the BI journey. So this is what it looks like. First step, identify a problem or identify something you're curious about or something you have a question about. Right? Don't pick something that you already know the answer to. You don't need to have BI for that yet. Right? You might eventually want to do that. Typically, organizations will start with sales, right? Because sales is the top piece. But if you understand who all your customers are and what you're selling them and what's your best SKU and all of that, don't start with sales. You already know that information. Start somewhere cost side. Take the other information. Go to your operations and grab a stamping machine and start with that, right? But start with something you need to understand better. Go identify the data. Go find it in your organization. Where does it exist? If it doesn't, you might need to create it, right? You might need to build that process out in order to have the data, in order to build some reporting on. Once you find that, you might need to go back through a loop, right? You maybe start creating it. Maybe you need to find more data, but keep going through that loop until you find the data you need, okay? Then let's develop up to 5 reports. And let's do it static. I don't care if you use paper and crayons, right? Let's do something static, not automated yet. You want to start there, and I want to say just 5, because organizations like to start with like, give me 100, give me 500 of these reports, but it's like taking a sip from the fire hose. And at the end of the day, you've got a change management issue to deal with, right? You've got all these people in your organization getting that report daily from their email or a PDF file. Or, I don't know, maybe somebody's printing it off and setting it on their desk today. Maybe that still happens. So in that example, you want to have these static reports, and then once you've got that kind of set and ready, you might find out you need to loop back in and get more data again. Okay? But in this situation, get those 5. Then you want to jump into getting your data warehouse set up, your ETL, your automation, kind of running in there. Create those views off of those data sets that you just created, those 5. And then train your users after adoption, continue that journey. Okay? That's the BI journey. How can I help you with that at Conclusive Insights? I'll take you through that whole step. Right? I'll help you find that data set that's a problem. I'll help you find the data. If you don't have the data, I'll help you find a way to develop that process. I'll help you develop those 5 reports. I'll do them for you. Once we've got that set up, I'll get your data warehouse going. I'll get your ETL processes working. Right? We'll get the BI all set up, and then I'll help you launch that in an organization and help guide you through that change management. I typically find that after 2 to 3 months of launch, people are now starting to adopt and adapt to having this data now in a Power BI view instead of their Excel files. At that point is when it's now, I need more, right? I've got these 5. 5's great, Ryan. I need 6. I need 7. I need this new data set. And then that's where you continue to go. The hardest part's getting that data warehouse going. Once it's set up, now you can do a lot more after that. All right. Whew. What questions? None. I did such a great job. Everybody understands exactly what I talked about. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you for some visuals that you've done, but
Yeah.
you got them. There they are. So, can you explain what we're seeing there on some of
Yeah,
this?
yeah. So did anybody come to the last seminar about 80-20? So we've got an 80-20 here. This is what the peak one is about. So on here, we're looking at customer quartiles. So this is a list of all the SKUs of a customer, and we're listing them in descending order, all their total revenue. And then we're looking at their A SKUs versus B. You can't see B because you got to scroll. And then you can see which quartile each of those are in. This one is a company that hires people, or a staffing company, and we're looking at their markup rate and what that ratio looks like to kind of see what's declining and what's increasing. This one is just showing our net sales by region, net sales by state. This is looking at sales over time, sales and gross margin. This one is more of a CRM view. So it's looking at their leads and opportunities, and they can slice it by all their salespeople and see how many opportunities are out there, how many close, what's their win rate, all that kind of stuff.
Where do you see people bite? Like, okay, we haven't been looking at data regularly, we haven't had those BI looks, and you give them something and it like changes their world all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think where it really bites is when they've tried something else, like they've tried Domo, and they stumble and we can't get through it. And then I can show them how we can pull this data together in a different way than using a tool like that, and it kind of gives them that aha moment. That's one of the bigger areas that I see.
But what kind of like problems, questions do you find are really common that people are like, oh my gosh, you just changed my world?
Ooh, that's a good one, Ryan.
I can answer that.
Okay, great.
So before Ryan started doing this with us at Thermostore, we had access to all this information using Cognos. And so if you had a question, you could go in and find out the answer. After you dug through it for 15 minutes, you got your one answer. But what this does is this allows you to get all the answers you could think of on one screen, and you can look at it over time, and you can change variables, and you can change the X and Y axis. You can change what you're looking at, you can change groupings, you can dive through it, and you can experience and learn things, as opposed to saying, let me go find out this one answer to this one question. So when you've got all the data, you can dig through it and find out that one answer to one question. But to gain insights and to test theories, to test what the relationships are between whatever variables you want to look at, this allows you to do it. And Cognos, you just could not do it. You'd have to like grab this data and put an Excel file and then try and figure it out yourself. And this automates it all for you. So it was amazing the amount of insights we could get once we got this thing set up.
You can find answers to questions you didn't know you had.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you know if the technology exists that if you have multiple departments that are asking for different reports, is there a technology that exists that will say, oh, the data that you're trying to collect, here, look at this report, and maybe you just need to add this field to it or this data and you're going to achieve what you want? Do you know if that exists?
I'm not aware of that, but that's usually where data governance comes into play, right? So some organizations will take the approach of like every department is in charge of their own data, And I would suggest not to do that because of reasons like that, right? You start losing, like, what does a measure mean? Like, how do you define what that measure looks like? And everybody starts using the same nomenclature, but the measure is doing something different. Now you've got people in organizations saying, well, my report says this and my report says that. And now you've got bad data again.
Have you done a lot of linking to machines, and how big of a pain is that?
Yeah, so I again, I wouldn't link to the machine. I would grab the data out of the machine. So usually the ones that are collecting the data have like a mini, what's called like a MySQL on it, which is just a mini SQL environment, and it's collecting that data. And then, yeah, as long as you connect it to your network, your IT staff's going to have a problem with that. So you got to work through all the firewall issues and all that. But once you can connect to it, then it's just grabbing data out of a SQL environment.
Okay, so you've done everything through SQL.
Yeah,
So far.
yeah. I mean, usually there's some kind of like,
Hopefully.
if they're collecting data, it's going into some kind of database within the hardware of that machine. Usually it's like short term, which is why you want to connect to it and kind of grab it, daily, so that you don't lose the history of it. Yes, sir.
So, profitability increases, efficiency increases, I mean, like, some ballpark on some of the things you've experienced doing what you're doing.
Like, you're asking like how much have you seen gross margin or EBITDA increase due to having this?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know that I can put an exact number to that. What I can say is that I've seen people in the organizations go from not being able to make decisions at all to now feeling comfortable that they can move forward. And I think one of the bigger problems in an organization, I used to talk to someone else in our organization about this, is the ability to not make that decision. Like, can you make that decision quicker, like to get ahead of things? To put an exact number to, you see a 5% increase in your EBITDA. I don't know that I could actually say that, but I can say for sure that you can make decisions a lot faster and a lot more comfortable, knowing that you understand that data that drives that decision.
Ryan, you were talking about the PPP forecasting report. It's so ancient history to me right now, I can't remember the number, but that one was very tangible, that was very
Yes.
effective. We literally saved millions.
Yes.
And on top of that, we had the proof, we had the justification that we went on the billings from our customer's perspective. We were able to show them exactly the cost pressure that we were facing, and it kind of let us off the hook in terms of passing it through. So it was not only the visibility, but it was a sales tool in that regard too, and it was literally millions of dollars.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
So we're using a lot of what you're doing, and I think the two biggest things for us in the production world that have benefited us from what you're doing is having visibility to downtime. What are your biggest reasons for downtime, and then what are your biggest reasons for scrap? And so we're able to put those in Paretos, and that was very clear. And some of those instances that popped up, we didn't have people focusing on those big issues, and we would always just focus on the top 5.
Yeah.
But that was eye-opening, and now we did those Paretos by department. So when we walk into any department on our daily walks, we can see live, real time, which issues are the biggest issues, and we really want to see an action item on our accountability board for those top 5 items. And so that has revolutionized the way that we're problem solving. And so I think what you're doing here is a window into that world, so that you can focus on those top problems or focus on those top customers where you didn't have that visibility before.
Yeah.
Or the clarity before.
Great example. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
A lot of times, I mean, if you have an API, obviously it's easier to.
Always.
When you don't have an API, or you have a vendor who's maybe a little bit antiquated, how often are you battling the vendor for a data map or to understand where the data is and what's going on? Is that a common problem?
Yeah, I mean, the vendors that don't have an API, they know it, and they don't have the best solutions for you. So you just have to kind of dig into the question, right? And say, okay, what can I do with this system? How can I get data out? Sometimes you have to ask the vendors those questions because your users don't know those answers. But usually you can find some way to extract data, right? Even if somebody has to manually extract it and then put it in the folder somewhere, you got some semi-automation. It's not 100%, but it'll get you in that space of BI at that point. Yeah.
Ryan,
Great.
This is great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.